I just firstly want to address the issue of children with scoliosis and promises that were made by Simon Harris, as we know, back in 2017, that no child with scoliosis or spina bifida would have to wait longer than 4 months for life-changing surgery. We all know that was a promise that was broken. The number of children who are waiting for spinal surgeries has again increased. Last April, the Taoiseach on the floor of the Dáil gave a commitment to my party leader, but also more importantly to parents of children with spina bifida and scoliosis and advocate groups, that he would meet those representative groups. He hasn't done so. That was 4 months ago, ironically. He still hasn't met them. You will have seen over the last number of days, particularly from Adam Higgins in the Sun, but others, where there's been reports of, again, parents having to take to the media to tell the story of their children who are waiting not just months but years for life-changing surgeries. And the question has to be asked of the Taoiseach, what has he done and what has the Minister for Health done? This is obviously related to the National Children's Hospital, because one of the problems is we don't have the capacity. Partly it's specialist surgeons who can carry out the procedures, but it's also the pre-care, the aftercare, and these are issues that are being raised by the families as well. It's access to theatre space. All of that obviously would improve if the Children's Hospital was built, and yet again we're hearing of more delays, more cost overruns, and I have to ask the question, what's the Taoiseach doing about it? You know, what's his response in relation to all of those issues? And rather than sound bites, which is what the families are saying they're getting from the Taoiseach, what they want is action. We don't need a Taoiseach that continuously gives sound bites on these issues and yet are failing these children. What we need is a Taoiseach that delivers with a Minister for Health once and for all for children with scoliosis and spina bifida. I also want to raise the issue of the Midwest and the HICWA report, or the HICWA inquiry, which has now been established. Obviously I welcome the fact that there is now going to be a review looking at emergency care services in the Midwest. I called for that myself for over 2 years. It's only now that that is being put in place. I am taken by what campaigners have said over the course of the last number of days, where they're raising concerns about the length of time it will take. Apparently the terms of reference say it'll be the summer of next year before there's any reporting back. I don't see why it should take that long. There are other things that the government need to do in between that, and I launched a plan myself earlier this year for the entire Midwest region in relation to what needs to be done in terms of primary care, community care, step-down beds, but also additional beds in Limerick, and all of that needs to be done, while there is a review that looks at whether a second emergency department is needed. But what we do have and have had for some time is wholesale cancellation of procedures right across the Midwest region, which is really angering people who live in the region. It's not fair that they're not getting the health services that they need, and they feel that it's second-tier, second-class health services for people who live in that part of the country because the government have failed. So we're seeing this right across many areas of healthcare, where we have failures, the Minister not acting, the government not acting, but particularly when it comes to children, there's a whole range of issues affecting children where Simon Harris particularly has made promises, he hasn't delivered, and he's failing them from my perspective.
You said that you want the Taoiseach to deliver action and that those families want action. What would be the action that would start to get those waiting lists for scoliosis back then?
Well, I think the first thing, Gavin, is that he should meet with the advocate groups, because what they've been calling for some time is greater transparency around the waiting lists. They've been asking for access to private healthcare to do some of the pre-operative work and post-operative work that needs to be done. Sometimes surgeries are delayed because the young child, for example, hasn't had the level of pre-operative work that needs to be done. We need to obviously accelerate the access internationally. That was something that, again, the government dragged their feet on. We don't know exactly how that's going to work out yet, although they're saying they are making it available to some families, but where's the transparency in relation to it? The task force that was set up, families have difficulties with in relation to accountability within Children's Health Ireland. I see it myself in relation to when we put down parliamentary questions and we don't always get the answers that we should get. So I think there's a clear lack of transparency within Children's Health Ireland. And then obviously the Children's Hospital is a big issue, and progressing that is going to be a big challenge. And the question then is that a priority for the government? Like, what action has the Taoiseach taken? Because if you think about the Children's Hospital, That caused the last general election. Simon Harris was the Minister for Health, if you remember. There was a motion of no confidence that was going to be tabled, and then the government went to the people. And here we are, 5 years later, the hospital still isn't built. Any completion date we're given comes and goes. There's no confidence that the current completion date will be realised, which means it may not even be open by the summer of next year. And yet we have children waiting, children with scoliosis, we have children with cancer having procedures cancelled. So there's a lot the Taoiseach can do, but the very first thing that needs to be done is that he meets with the advocate groups. And then there is the issue of recruiting international specialists, because it is a very specialist area. You do need surgeons that have the skills to carry out the procedures. But this is an issue going back to 2017. It was only 2 years ago when the Minister provided the funding, as you know, for additional capacity. We still haven't had publication of the audit that was done to look at whether or not the money that was given was used for the appropriate purposes. So I would see those as reasonable asks from parents, that audit is published, that we get the capacity that's needed domestically, that we look at how children can be treated internationally, that there's respect given in relation to transparency, that we recruit the surgeons that are there, and that once and for all there's a plan that can actually make sure that children can be seen within 4 months, as opposed to just more promises and rhetoric that we're getting from both the Taoiseach and the Minister for Health.
Deputy, just on a separate matter, can I ask you about the calls this week by victims of the former surgeon Michael Shine for a new commission of investigation into his abuse, and separately to Sinn Féin support their calls for the 2009 inquiry to be published?
Well, I spoke to a victim this morning myself, and this person was somebody who contributed to the 2009 review. He's very angry that the report was not published. He was one of 130 men who gave testimony in good faith. There was reasons given, as we know in the past historically, as to why that report wasn't published. I'm not sure that still holds water today. This victim was telling me that he personally has not even seen a review or a report that he fed into himself. He also tells me that in his court case he was challenged in relation to evidence that he gave or contributions he made into that review process, and yet he hasn't had sight of the report. So I think that's wrong. I think what needs to happen is that we have a victim-led approach. The Taoiseach in the last couple of days, as I understand it, has said he wants to meet with the families, but he's made a lot of promises to meet people. He needs to do it. He needs to meet with the victims. He needs to listen to what they want. If a commission of investigation is what the victims need, absolutely that should be put in place. I don't see at this point any reason why the report in 2009 should be published. I mean, if you have victims who, in good faith, gave evidence and contributed to a report, and yet they themselves haven't seen it, aside from the fact that the public hasn't seen the report, but they as victims haven't seen it, I think is wrong. So there has to be transparency in relation to all of this. It has to be victim-led, whatever is done. It can't be passing the buck either between the Minister for Health or the Taoiseach. The government has to make a decision. Simon Harris is the Taoiseach, he leads government, and he should make the decision. But I think what angered a lot of the victims is the Taoiseach saying that he has to stock take. How much longer does the Taoiseach have to stock take on all of these issues? He needs to meet with the victims first and foremost, and then from that, in my view, deliver on the wishes of those victims, because we all know the horror stories of what came from all of the court cases so far. It was awful.
David, what's your view about the disagreement in government over the residential zone property tax? What does it say about the cohesiveness of this coalition as we're heading into an election?
Well, it's a fake row that's going on at the moment, because twice over the last number of years that action was deferred on this issue, as you know. That was a decision collectively taken by government, including by the Green Party, but also by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael representatives at Cabinet. We proposed an amendment to the finance bill that would have dealt with some of the concerns that people have in relation to active farms and omitting them from this bill. So if land is being used actively for farming, of course that should be omitted. That should have been accepted by government, and then it should have proceeded with ensuring that landowners can't hoard land that is zoned for housing, that's needed for housing. And we see this from our perspective as a SOP again, by Fianna Fáil especially to developers and to wealthy landowners. We have a housing crisis. My priority and who I stand with are people who need access to social and affordable homes. Owen O'Brien over the last number of weeks has launched a comprehensive plan on building more social and affordable homes, but particularly 50,000 affordable homes and also private homes as well. So we need to use all of the zone land that we have to build the homes that people need. This bill is one of the things that needs to be done, but the government have dragged their feet on it. This is a fake row between the Greens and the government, or Fianna Fáil especially. They all deferred this over the course of a number of years. Pearse Doherty gave the government an out, they didn't take it, and yet here we are now with a mess of the government making. And it's just another example of a government that just can't deal with the housing crisis, passing the buck between themselves, involved in fake debates at government level and not taking responsibility for their own failures.
Speaking of distrust within coalition leaders, what does it say that the three coalition leaders have all committed to an election the other side of Christmas, and yet it seems that everyone else within government is still preparing for one this autumn anyway, and if there is one in autumn, will you be ready for it?
Well, I don't know of too many people standing here or too many people out there in the real world that believes anything that the government says when it comes to election dates. So I don't know when the election is, but it's a fair bet that it will be sometime this year. I mean, that's out of our hands. Our perspective is that we have to plan for an election whenever that election is. As you can see, we're selecting candidates right across the state. We have launched very comprehensive proposals on a whole range of issues, including mental health that we launched last week, housing. We're launching childcare proposals in the next week or two as well. Issues on immigration and migration, as you saw over the last number of weeks as well. So we've been setting out our stall, and obviously when an election is called, we'll take the government on in relation to their failures. The timing of the election is obviously a matter for government, but certainly we're planning for an election sometime this year if it happens, and we'll be ready for that election if and when it's called.